Today's daf is daf Chaf Aleph. We'll start with the Mishnah on daf Chaf Amid Beis. Ze Omer Ksav Yodi, V'ze Ksav Yodo Shel Chaveri. V'ze Omer Ze Ksav Yodi, V'ze Ksav Yodi Yodo Shel Chaveri. Harei Elu Nemon. So the Mishnah wants to know what is the necessary rules for Kiyum Shtaros. And now we're talking about a case where the Eidim themselves come to identify their own signatures. And Ruvain says, this is my signature, and I recognize the other signature as that of Shimon. Shimon says, this is my signature, and the other I recognize, and I can attest that that's Ruvain's signature. And that's enough to be Mekayim the Shtar. And in effect, we have two witnesses on each chasima. And you might add the chiddush is that there's no din of nogei b'yedus here. He's testifying about himself and his own signature, but that's how we verify the signatures. Now we have a case where the Mishnah continues, Ze Omer Ze Ksav Yodi v'Ze Omer Ze Ksav Yodi. Each one, Ruvain identifies his own signature, Shimon identifies his own signature, but he cannot testify looking at the other signature that definitely belongs to the other person. And the Mishnah says in such a case, Rebbe says we're going to have to get at least one other witness to attach himself to a kat of two Eidim testifying on each one of these two chasimos. So when, let's say, Levi comes along to join this Kiyum Shtaros, he'll link up with Ruvain to have two Eidim sign attesting to the signature of Ruvain. He'll link up with Shimon because he identifies the signature of Shimon, and now we have two Eidim testifying on the signature of Shimon. Chachamim disagree with Rebbe. The Omrim, Einom tzrichem letzarif imoim acher. Neman Adam lomar zek savyodi. According to the Chachamim, it's sufficient that each aid will testify on his own signature. There's no need to go beyond that and add a third witness. Levi is totally unnecessary. We could be Mekayim the Shtaros by Ruvain identifying his own signature and Shimon his own. Now, from the Mishnah, it becomes clear that there's a difference between Kiyum Shtaros al Yidei Acherim and Kiyum Shtaros al Yidei Ha'edim Atzmam, those who sign the shtar. In general, if we have to introduce other Eidim to testify, then we will certainly require two Eidim to testify in each one of the signatures. We cannot be Mekayim the shtar if one witness will testify on one chasim and another single witness on the other. But if the Eidim themselves who are signed on the shtar, they come to Bezdin to be Mekayim their own chasimos, then we have Machlokes Rebbe and Rabbanan in our Mishnah as to whether or not we need two witnesses on each chasima. But again, just to emphasize, if we were two other Eidim would testify, we definitely, beyond the shadow of a doubt, we need two witnesses on each chasima. Now the Gemara is going to try to analyze the machlokes between Rebbe and the Rabbanan. Kishetimtze lomar, when you investigate this properly, and you try to determine the svaros of both Rebbe and the Rabbanan, you'll find the following. L'divrei Rebbe, according to the sheet of Rebbe, that if each one of the Eidim come to be Mekayim only his Ksav Yoda, that's not enough, but rather we have to be Metare, a third witness, to join up with each one of the two witnesses on his Chasim. And here we start our daf for today, Chaf Aleph. Rebbe's Shita is that Eidim who are coming to be Mekayim the Shtar and Bezdin, they are going to testify not only on their chasimos, but in effect, by testifying on their chasimos, they are sort of implying that they know about the transaction which is being recorded and testified by the shtar, by the document itself. And the Edom are basically saying, each one, I identify my ksav yad, my signature, my chasima, and at the same time, I'm not going to deny that this Maisa, which is recorded in the shtar with my signature on it, actually took place. So you and I might think that in such a case, we're basically let's call it duplicating or replicating the original edus that's written in the shtar. But Rebbe holds that that's not enough, because that would make it into what's called edus bal peh. And the goal of the kiyum ashtar is to make this into a milva or edus b'chsav, b'shtar. So if our goal is edus b'shtar, then in a certain sense, we're going to cut off our relationship to the actual Maisa Shahaya and focus on the shtar, and therefore on the chasimos of the shtar. Al ksav yodam heim mi'idin. So they are testifying, according to Rebbe, not primarily on the halva itself, but rather on the ksav yad, meaning on the chasimos. That's the most important point that we can remember in this sugya, is that according to Rebbe, the edus is going to be on the chasimos, sort of divorced and distanced from the actual Maisa that's recorded in the shtar. And therefore, if the subject, or I think that maybe a better word would be the object, if the object of their testimony to be Mekayim the shtar is the chasimos, then basically we can divorce ourselves from the original Maisa Shahaya, the halva, let's say, and focus on the chasimos. But there are two chasimos, so each chasima needs its own edus. Again, the chiddush is that a person can testify as an aid on his own signature and verify that he, in fact, signed this. This is his John Hancock, but that's going to be edus on his chsam yodam. Is going to be another edus on the other chasima. And in each case, we're going to need two witnesses on each chasima. Again, if each aid recognizes not only his own chasima, but also his colleague's chasima, that's fine. And then we have two aidim and a kat on each chasima. But in an event that each aid recognizes his signature and only his signature, we need to add another aid so that we have two aidim on each one of the two chasimos. That's the sheet of Rebbe. Now we get to the Chachamim. So let's do a quick review of the Shitas Chachamim. According to the Chachamim, if each aid testifies on his own chasima, Zek Sav Yodi, that's enough. Now, how is that so? We just finished saying that according to Rebbe, the logic is that each chasima needs edus. Got to be Mekayim each one of the two chasimas. You can't be Mekayim one chasima, not the other. And each chasima requires a separate edus. How could Zek Sav Yodi on the part of each one of the two edus be sufficient? So the Gemara says, the edus here for Kiyum Ashtar is not on the chasimos. That's not the object of this edus, but really on the halva itself that's being recorded in the shtar. And each one of these edim is testifying that he saw Reuven lend money to Shimon, for example. If that be the case, then we really have the edus that we need. Why? Because the two edim are both reiterating the original edus on alva. So we have a kad edim. So again, the Chiddush of the Rabban is we don't require two edim to testify in each chasima. There's a kind of a roundabout way of setting up a kiyum shtar, and that is by having edus on the part of the two edim that are signed on the shtar on the halva itself. That's called a monashah b'shtar edim. Once we have two edim testifying on the halva, then the shtar is memela mekuyim. Why? Because we know it's not a ziyum. Right? A counterfeit shtar would mean that the halva never took place. It was Bada Bilima. They created this whole story about Reuven lending money to Shimon. But if the two Eidim are each testifying that Reuven Achen lent money to Shimon, as recorded in the shtar, then the shtar is Memela Mekuya. So again, I believe, and I hope I'm not wrong here, that even Rebbe would require that the Eidim who are testifying on the Chasimos, I mean, Zek Savyodi, meaning the Eidim that are signed, they're testifying also on Halva, but Rebbe is going to shift the focus of the Edus from the Halva to the Chasimos. And the goal of Rebbe is to bridge the gap between Edus Baal Peh and Edus B'Shtar. To generate a Chalut Shem Edus B'Shtar, you need to testify on the Chasimos. And there could be two separate Kabbalah's Edios. There's going to be a Kabbalah's Edus on this Chasima and another Kabbalah's Edus on another Chasim, requiring a minimum of two Eidim testifying on each Chasim. Now, the Gemara asks Pshita. I'm not so comfortable with the word Pshita here, but I think what the Gemara means by Pshita is, was there another possible alternative approach to understand Rebbe and the Chachamim? I could have suggested that Rebbe Sfuke Mesafkele. Rebbe really is on the fence. He's vacillating between these two possibilities. He's not clear, number one, al Ksav Yodam Me'idim, or al Monasheh B'Shtar Me'idim. And therefore, since he has the possibility of Ksav Yodam Me'idim, if he only had the possibility of Monasheh B'Shtar Me'idim, then it would be sufficient to have each witness respectively testify and attest to the veracity of his signature. But Rebbe had a suffix that maybe it's not al Monasheh B'Shtar, but maybe it's al Ksav Yodam Me'idim, and that's why Rebbe is going to require l'chumra, two witnesses on each signature. And in the Masechet writes, "Sheyesh lahachmir misafek." Again, according to this Ma'odetem, according to this Havan, it's very strange to me. I always wondered, when you raise the bar and the requirements for kiyum ashtar, is that called a chumrah? I'm a little confused about that, because it's a chumrah vis-a-vis the malva. It's kind of a kula vis-a-vis the lova, because the lova is claiming the whole deal was a counterfeit. But I guess the Gemara is analyzing it from the perspective of the kashrus, the status of the shtar. And if you lower the requirements of this for kiyum ashtaros, that's called a kula as far as the shtar and its kashrus is concerned. If, on the other hand, you will up the ante on the requirements, like, for example, if you hold al chasimas yodam he'me'idim, according to Rebbe, therefore, I need two Eidim on each Chasima, that's called a Chumrah, in the sense that we're being machmir in the halach of Kashrus Ashtar and being more demanding and setting a higher bar for Kiyum Ashtaros. Okay. Now, again, the Havamina Rebbe was on the fence. He was Mesupok, and in the Maskoni's Vada. Is there a nafkamina between the two? Between Rebbe as a suffix Maybe it's al ksav yodam heme'idim, or Rebbe is a vaday al ksav yodam heme'idim. That's what the Gemara is about to embark upon. As you'll see, the next two words in the Gemara is v'nafka mina. Now, in order to appreciate this nafka mina, let's just mention that the Torah requires al pishnayim edim yakum tov, and what Chazal understood as al pishnei edim, it means that each aid has the same identical impact as the other aid. So if you have two aidim, each one has an impact of, let's say, out of 150, 50-50. And if you have four aidim, it's going to be, 25 each. There has to be an equilibrium. That's the premise of this Gemara. Now, keep in mind, as we go through this Gemara, that if you hold al ksav yodam heme'idim, then there's a separate haggadas edus on each chasimas yad. If, on the other hand, you hold al Masechet b'shtar heme'idim, there's one haggadas edus on the Maisa that's being recorded in the shtar, in this case of alva. Now, if we go with al Masechet b'shtar heme'idim, each aid that's signed on the shtar could testify on his own ksav yodo, and then once we have both chasimos taken care of, they're both covered. Now we have a kat of edim. Each one of those two edim has an equal share in establishing that the lov has to pay the mal, 50-50. However, if you hold al ksav yodam heme'idim, like Rebbe, then it's not so clear that we have a 50-50 situation. Why? Because it's fine and dandy if the two Eidim are alive and well, each witness is testified together with someone else, either his co-witness or with somebody else, a third party, on each chasima. That's fine. But nafkamina, the Gemara says, let's say one of the two Eidim that assigned the shtar holach le'olamo, he's not alive anymore. And the Gemara says the following: Liboy shnayim min ashuk lahoid olav. Where do we get the edus on the deceased, on the signature of the deceased? We can no longer allow for, let's assume Reuven died, right? We can no longer allow Shimon to testify on the chasima of the late Reuven, because the imkain, if we would allow that, nafka nechi revia, which means 3/4, the mamona apfum b'dechad sada. One aid, in this case Shimon, by testifying on his own signature and on the signature of the late Reuven, would be achieving 3/4 of what we need from the Eidos. Why? Because what's going to happen is that Shimon is going to testify Teksav Yodi on his own signature. And that's fine, because if you remember the Reish of our Mishnah, let's go back to the Reish of the Mishnah, Zeh Omer Ksav Yodi, V'zeh Omer, right? V'zeh Omer Ksav Yodi, etc., etc. Elu Nemonim. So now, what's going to happen is that Shimon is going to be responsible for 3/4 of the mammon. Why? Because we said that if it's almona shebishtarei me'idim, which is the sheet of the Chacham hold that that's vadai, then that's already covering 50%. Now on the late Ruvain, we need two Eidim to verify his signature. If Shimon's going to be one of those two Eidim, then in fact, Shimon, is playing 3/4 of the role. And that's if you hold that there's a suffix here, because perhaps Almona Shebishtarei Me'idim. So I'm just going to read, the Masechet has an explanation for this. Let's see, I just have to open up a little window here. Let's read what he has to say here. He says, Im nomar almona shebishtarei me'idim, memelek sha'ed hachosum al ashtar, made rak al chasimoso, nimtzo shal yidei duso, yesh kan kvar chatzi edu shleimo, she'en tzricha tziruf im eid acher. Yitzaref im eid acher min hashuk lo al ksav yodo shal eid sheni aro motzi shlosha schalokim namomon chatzi al yidei kiyum shalo al chasimoso v'od revak shemitzaref leiduso shal eid min hashuk lo al chasimos ha'eid hasheni v'ilu eid hasheni motzi rak reva me'amomon. Omnom im nomar sha'edim al ksav yodom me'idim nimtza. V'yesh kan shtei hagodos edus al shtei chasimos shebishtar. V'ein ha'ed hachosem al ashtar yochol lahoid bi'atzmo al chasimas yodo v'lo shitztaref imo eid sheni min hashuk. In ke yotzi mikach shekol eid b'fnei atzmo rak motzi chatzi momon hakosev b'shtar. ושניהם מעידים על שתי חסימות בשווה, ואין אחד מהם נאמר בפני עצמו אפילו על חסימה אחת. ומתוך שרבי מסתפק בדבר נהב אמינו, אם על כסב יודם או על מונה שבשטרים מעידים, is therefore hocha in our Mishnah, if you have two Eidim who are signed on the shtar, and they're both alive, is Rebbe's going to say lechumra that ein shneim yecholim litztarif lehaid al hashtar im kol echad made rak al chasimus yodo shalo below chasimus yodo shalei hasheni. Why? Because if we hold al ksav yodam edim, we require two edim on each chasima. V'hacha, in the case where one aid dies, v'ed hasheni rotzel tztarif im aid acher min hashuk lohed al shtei chasima shabashtar. Yesh lo l'Rebbe linkot lechumra she lo yuchal lohed al chasimosa shal hasheni shema al monish shabashtar edim v'im yod al kach Yotzu shloshis chalokim moment al yitei eid echa. And therefore, Kamash Malon, the Rebbe, Mifshat Chitale Bein Lakula Ubein Lachumra. So let's just see what Lakula and Lachumra is, and then we'll go over this. He says, if it's Lakula, then it's Pasha to Rebbe. Pasha to Rebbe that Al Ksav Yodam Heim Me'idim, and therefore if one of them dies, then we don't have to bring L'chumra two Eidim to testify, two Eidim from the Shuk, right, to testify on Ruvain, the late Ruvain's Chasima, but rather the Eid Hasheni, that means Shimon is alive, he can testify together with someone else from the Shuk. We don't need to bring two people from the Shuk. He can testify from the Shuk. Because on his signature, he was only 50%, and on Ruvain's signature, he's only 50%. We need two separate ADLs of two Eidim on each Chasima. Now, the impression I get is that, just to simplify matters at least, that there's only one other aid, Nashuk. So that other aid testifies on each one of the Chasimos, and Shimon, who's alive, the surviving aid, will testify on each one of the two Chasimos, and each one is effectuating 50% of the moment. Ubein l'chumra, shal yuchal edim chasum l'shtar lo tzi mamon, כששני עדים חסום בשטר בואו לקיים שטר ובסק כל אחד מעיד רק חסים את ידו, but rather l'chumra al ksav yodam hem me'idim, and therefore each one needs another person to testify together with him, make up a kat on each one of the chasimos. So now let's just go over the hava. What would be the havamina? What would be the nafkamina, the havamina, if Rebbe only had a suffix? If Rebbe only had a suffix, then the nafkamina is going to be if Ruvain dies, because now, if we're going to say that Almona Shebeshtar Hem Me'idim, then once Shimon testifies, identifying his signature, he already was motzi 50% of the mama, because he's being made on the halva. And then when he joins together with another aide to testify on Ruvain's signature, he's being motzi another quarter of the mama, all told 3/4. Omar Abuda Marav, Shnaim Achasum al Ashtar, Umeis Echad Mehem, Srichim Shnaim and Ashuk Lahoidalov. You need another two Eidim to testify on the late Ruvain's signature, so that Shimon is only testifying on his own signature. Because if Shimon would join hands together with another Eidim and Ashuk, we'll call him Levi, to testify on Ruvain's signature, is then Shimon is in effect being motzi 3/4 of the mama. And this is all based on Almona Shebishtar Hem Me'idim. Ubazu Rebbe Lekua, Rabban Lechumra. Here Dafka Rebbe is the one who's makil. You don't need two Eidim in Ashuk, but rather Shimon, in addition to testifying on his own signature, he can join hands with someone else, who will call Levi, to testify on Ruvain's signature. So again, it's a little bit strange when the Gemara says Rebbe Lekula, it means Rebbe Lekula in this particular scenario where Meis Echad Miyam. In general, Rebbe is Machmir because Rebbe is the one who requires 2 Eidim on each Chasima, which means that each one of them has to testify on the other Chasima of their colleague, or alternatively, bring in someone else min hashuk. That's Rebbe's Chumrah. But paradoxically, in a scenario where one of the 2 Eidim signed on the star dies, Rebbe's going to come out with a Chumrah. He's not going to allow Shimon to testify in addition to his own signature to Reuven's signature. Why? Because what? I'm sorry. Was I going according to Rebbe? Let's backtrack. If it's Rebbe, then you're okay, right? Because again, Rebbe is holding Aksav Yodam. They're being made on the Chasimos. So if they're made on the Chasimos, then it's absolutely fine for Shimon to be made together with someone else on both his own signature and Reuven's signature. And the Rabbanan in this case are l'chumra, because the Rabbanan can't allow Shimon to link up with someone else to testify in Reuven's signature after we apply the principle in Shimon's context of Almonish B'Shtarei Me'idim. Shimon was already motzi 50% of the mammon. Now, if you're going to allow him to link up with someone min hashuk on Reuven's signature, you have to add another quarter of the mammon, which we cannot do. So now it turns out that according to the Rabbanon, we're going to need 2 people min hashuk to testify and identify the signature of the late Reuven. So the Gemara says, "Leker trei elachad mai." Is there any solution to the following scenario? Reuven died, and there's no one else in the world besides Levi who can attest to this. Besides Levi and Shimon, to attest to the identity of this signature of Reuven. So what are we left with? We're left with a situation where, let's say, Reuven dies and Shimon, according to the Rabbanan, testifies on his own signature. Now he wants to link up with Levi to testify on Reuven's signature, and there's no Yisachar. If there was Yisachar, so let Levi link together with Yisachar to testify on Reuven's signature. But the only person other than Levi that could testify about the signature of Reuven in this case is Shimon. And that would make Shimon into 3/4 out of a whole, which we can't allow. Okay, this is a little bit dangerous. Whenever you sign something, you never know if it gets into the wrong hands, they could put whatever on top of your signature. But okay, it's on chaspa, so we'll see about chaspa in a minute. Chaspa is a piece of pottery. Oh. V'shadilei b'beidina. So what happens is that Shimon, the surviving aide, will write his signature on a chaspa, and v'shadilei b'beidina, and he'll bring it into Bezdin. He's not going to be actively involved in identifying his signature on the original star between the two, the Malv and the Lova. Right now, as far as his signature is concerned, he's not going to get involved. Bezdin's going to be able to do it on their own after he signs his name on a chaspa. So now Shimon has not been effective in half of the mammon. He no longer has to testify about his signature. The ozil ihu v'hai v'hai u'misadi ha'idach. And now Shimon could join up with Levi to testify about Ruvain's signature, because now he's playing a 50-50 role. Very sharp. But the Gemara wants to derive a side halacha from Abaye. On the side is dafka chaspa. He'll sign on a chaspa, which is a piece of cheres, of china. Aval a megil to lo, but not on a cloth. Why? Dilma mishkach le'inishi to lo maili, because of the lui my deboy, v'hotzi Allah my deboy. If a swindler will get a hold of this chasim of his that's on a megilt on a cloth, he'll be able to write anything he feels he wants, and the signature will now be valid and binding. And this is all based on a Mishnah in Bava Basra. Tanan at the end of Bava Basra, Hotzi olav ksav yodo shu chayev lo govim nechasim b'nei chorim. So this is what we call in English an IOU note. Right? So if on the top it says, I, the undersigned, borrowed $1 million from so-and-so, and now that person, the undersigned, is actually the undersigned, and he only signed on a cloth without any, without any writing on it, but somebody filled in the writing on this cloth. And then it becomes binding. This is not the case for a chaspa, because we never trust a chasim of a chaspa, because it's very easy to counterfeit, and you can't identify really the fine nuances of a person's signature if it's written on a chaspa. Right, we always paskin like the chachamim. Now we talk a little bit about the rules of psach. Now the time halacha Rebbe Mechavero. You might think that since we always paskin like Rebbe, therefore we're going to paskin like Rebbe against the chachamim. No, Mara says Kamash Malon. We only paskin like Rebbe against one other Tana, but not against the majority rules. Okay, now the Gemara is going to ask a kasha on this statement that we had in the name of Rav Shmuel, that we paskin like the Chacham. He gives a mnemonic device. Amalei Rav Chinina Bar Chiel Rav Yehuda. The Amri Leil to say Rav Huna Rav Yehuda Rav Yehuda. The Amri Leil going to others. Rav Chia Bar Yehuda Rav Yehuda. Thank God for the name Yehuda. Umi Amar Shmuel Hachi. Could it possibly be that Shmuel holds that Allah Kidiri Chachamim, and that means that Almanash B'Shtarhi Me'idim for who started enough me Beidin Demar Shmuel? There was a star that came out of the Bezdin of Shmuel as a star Mekuya. Second, sorry. So again, there was a Kiyum star in the Bezdin of Mar Shmuel, Vaviksiv Bey, and the Kiyum Ashtar of the Bezdin said the following: Midasa Rav Anan Bar Chia. Midasa means once he came. Who came? Rav Anan Bar Chia came into Bezdin. He's one of the signatures. The Asid Achasimos Yade, he testified not only on his own signature, but Achad Deime, but also on the other witness, on the other signature. Umanu, who is the other witness that signed? Rav Hanan Bar Rav. Okay. Umida Aso Rav Hanan Bar Abba. When Rav Hanan Bar Abba came into Bezdin, he's the second witness. Asid Achasimos Yode, Chad Deime. He too, exactly like Rav Hanan, testified not only on his own signature, but also on his colleague's signature. Uman Rav Hanan Bar Chia. So what happened? Isharnoi v'kiamnoi kidechazi. Everything is written in the royal we, in the plural. We give chizuk and kiyum to the shtar. And we can testify that the ksav yodam of the Eidim is genuine, is authentic, without any counterfeit. So you see that Shmuel paskins like Rebbe, not like Chacham. Because according to Chachamim, it would be sufficient for each aid, in this case Rav Anan and Rav Anan and Rav Hanan, to testify each one respectively on his own signature. That's the Chachamim sheet. It was Rebbe who required two witnesses to testify on each signature because Al Tzav Yodam Me'idin. So how do we reconcile the two decisions and rulings of Shmuel? Amalei, Rabbi Yehuda says, Hahu Shtara Diyasmeha. This was a shtar of orphans. It means, let's say Reuven during his lifetime extended a loan to Shimon. Reuven dies, and Hanoch, the orphan son of Reuven, wants to collect a chov from Shimon. V'chosh Shmuel lebezdin toen. And Shmuel was afraid of a bezdin that might come to the wrong conclusion. There'll be toeh b'dvar halacha. And they might come to the conclusion that halacha is like Rebbe, even against the majority. V'sara Shmuel, Dilma Ika Desvirle. Maybe there are those who hold that halacha kirebi michavero v'lo michavero. Okay. And ubeha afilu mechavero. And in this case, even though Rebbe is in the minority view, we have to be choshesh l'chumra for the opinion of Rebbe, requiring 2 witnesses on each signature. Stavar, therefore Shmuel held, Avid Ravcha de Milsa, Kiechid lo mafsede Yasmin. He was afraid that maybe this star would show up at some point in a Bezdin Hatoim. Bezdin who mistakenly paskin like Rebbe. And if Shmuel did not require 2 witnesses to testify in each signature, in that Bezdin Shaltoim, who maintain that the ruling of Rebbe is accepted, they're going to disqualify the star unless there are 2 witnesses on each signature. So again, Mikra Din Mar Shmuel would have accepted 1 testimony on each chasima, because Amana Shebishtar Hemeidim. But he was machmir for the shita of Rebbe that Al Ksav Yodom Hemeidim, to require 2 witnesses on each signature, so that if this star with the henpei would be produced by the Yasmei or the Malvin in another city, they won't passel the star by saying that there was only each witness that recognized his signature. Omar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Eid v'dayon mitztarf. The Malva comes into Bezdin claiming a halva from the Love, and Bezdin was Mekayim the shtar. Now, when the Malva comes to collect with this shtar, and there's a kiyum on the shtar, the Lova claims that the whole thing was a ziyuf. The whole story is a counterfeit. Even the signatures of the Eidim, and even the signatures of Dayanim on the henpei. So Shmuel says, Eid v'dayan mitztarfim. We're going to testify with one of the Eidim who signed on the shtar, and he's going to identify and verify his signature. And one of the Dayanim, let's presume there were 3 Dayanim that signed the henpei, one of those 3 will testify in his own signature. Maybe that he was one of the Eidim, one of the Dayanim who accepted the Eidus of the Malva and Mumekayim the stars, mitztarfim. Very strange. Omar Rabbi Bar Chama Kamalia Hashmait. Omar Rabbi, my Mal Yusa. Well, why are you boasting about this sugya? My dikomasid sada lokomasid dina. My dikomasid dina lokomasid sada. How can you possibly imagine integrating these 2 testimonies? One person is testifying on his own signature on the shtar, and the other is testifying on the veracity of the shtar, not on the manashib shtar, right? So you have 2 Eidim signed on the shtar, and now Ruvain is going to come and identify his signature, meaning that Ruvain is testifying that so-and-so borrowed money from so-and-so. Now we get the Dayan to testify that the shtar is a shtar kosher. And that's a whole different testimony. Has nothing to do with the Malva and the Lova. It has to do with the authenticity of the signature. Eloki also Rami Bar Yechezkel, he came from Bavel and he heard what his brother Rabbi Yehuda was saying in the name of Shmuel, that Eid V'dai Mitztarfin. Omar, he declared, Lo titzisnu lahani kloli. Don't listen and observe and obey these rules. The Kyle Yehuda Achi Mishmei de Shmuel, that my brother Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel. Meaning, if you want to be Mekayim the Shtar, you need that the signatories, the Eidim who are signed on the Shtar, shall verify their signatures, or if you have Dayanim who are signed on a handpeg, so they will identify, again, we only need 2 out of the 3 because all we need is Eidim on the handpeg, and that's going to be the kiyum of the shtar. But we cannot link up the aid together with the dayan.